Emergency in the void. The piece of station harmony shattered at exactly 14:32 Galactic Standard Time. Marcus Chen had been elbow-deep in the atmospheric recycling unit when the emergency klaxons began their bone-chilling wail. Red warning lights bathed the engineering section in crimson shadows as the station's AI announced in its calm, mechanical voice, "Hull breach detected in diplomatic quarter. All emergency personnel respond immediately." Marcus dropped his plasma wrench and grabbed his emergency kit. At 29, he had spent 7 years working on various space installations, but Station Harmony was special. This wasn't just another human outpost floating in the void. It was humanity's first truly integrated diplomatic station, home to representatives from 12 different species. Each corridor told a story of cooperation between civilizations that had once been strangers among the stars. His boots pounded against the metal deck plating as he raced through the station's twisting corridors. The diplomatic quarter was in Section C, normally a peaceful area where alien ambassadors conducted their business far from the industrial noise of the engineering sections. Marcus had rarely had reason to visit that part of the station, but today was different. Today, someone's life hung in the balance. The scene that greeted him in Section C was chaos. Emergency crews had sealed off 3 corridors while technicians worked frantically at emergency control panels. The air itself seemed to shimmer with the distortion of a failing atmospheric field. Chief Engineer Rodriguez spotted Marcus and waved him over, her weathered face grim with concern. "Chen, thank God you're here," she called out over the noise of emergency systems. "We've got a real problem. The Velterran ambassador is trapped in Conference Room 7. Her environmental suit malfunctioned right when the breach happened. The emergency protocols locked down the room, and now she's sealed in with maybe 15 minutes of breathable air left." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Velterrans were one of the most respected species in the galactic community, known for their wisdom and diplomatic skills. They were also completely unable to breathe the oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere that humans preferred. Without a functioning environmental suit, the ambassador would suffocate in minutes. "Why can't we override the emergency seals?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The system detected the hull breach and went into full lockdown mode," Rodriguez explained, pulling up schematics on her portable display. "It thinks there's a massive atmospheric leak, so it sealed everything to prevent decompression. The computer won't let us override it until we can prove the breach is contained." "And how long will that take?" "At least 30 minutes, maybe longer." Rodriguez's expression was grim. "She'll be dead long before then." Marcus studied the schematics on Rodriguez's screen. Conference Room 7 was deep in the diplomatic quarter, accessible only through corridors that were now sealed by blast doors designed to contain hull breaches. But there was another way. The maintenance shafts that ran between the walls were too small for the emergency seals to close completely, if someone could crawl through the narrow passages. "There's a maintenance shaft that leads directly to Conference Room 7, Marcus said, tracing the route with his finger. "I can get to her through the service tunnels." Rodriguez shook her head. "Those shafts aren't meant for human access, Marcus. They're barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. And if there really is a hull breach, you could be walking into a death trap." "If I don't try, she dies anyway," Marcus replied, already strapping on his emergency breathing apparatus. "Besides, someone has to check if the breach is real or just a sensor malfunction." The next 20 minutes felt like the longest of Marcus's life. The maintenance shaft was even narrower than the schematics had suggested, forcing him to army crawl through passages barely wider than his shoulders. His emergency kit scraped against the metal walls with every movement, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air of the station's climate control system. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the shaft, and Marcus could hear the station's systems working overtime to maintain atmospheric pressure. Every few meters, he passed sensor nodes and control junctions that monitored the station's vital signs. The readings he glimpsed on his portable scanner suggested that Rodriguez had been right to be concerned. Something was definitely wrong with the station's atmospheric integrity. though the exact nature of the problem remained unclear. When Marcus finally reached the access panel for Conference Room 7, he paused to check his instruments one more time. The atmospheric readings were confusing. There was definitely a pressure differential, but it wasn't consistent with a major hull breach. Something else was going on. He carefully opened the access panel and peered into the conference room. The space was dimly lit by emergency lighting, and he could see a figure slumped against the far wall. Ambassador Zaravel Nathi was one of the most striking individuals Marcus had ever encountered, even in distress. The Velterrans were tall and elegant, with smooth features and skin that seemed to shift between deep blue and silver depending on the light. Intricate patterns covered their visible skin, designs that Marcus had learned were not tattoos, but natural bioluminescent markings that changed with their emotional state. Right now, Zora's patterns were pulsing in rapid, chaotic swirls of red and orange, colors that Marcus remembered from his cultural briefings meant distress and fear. Her environmental suit, a sleek piece of technology that normally provided her with the methane-rich atmosphere her species required, was flickering with error lights. The suit's transparent faceplate was fogged with condensation, and Marcus could see that she was breathing in short, panicked gasps. "Ambassador," Marcus called out softly as he squeezed through the access panel into the room. "I'm here to help." Zara's 4 eyes focused on him with difficulty. The Velterrans had 2 large primary eyes and 2 smaller secondary ones that gave them exceptional peripheral vision. When she spoke, her voice was translated by the universal communicator built into her suit, though the device's malfunction made her words sound distorted and mechanical. "Engineer Chen," she managed to say, recognizing him from previous encounters in the station's common areas. "How did you?" "The seals. Maintenance shaft," Marcus explained briefly, kneeling beside her to examine the malfunctioning suit. "Don't try to talk. Save your air. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with your suit." The Velterran environmental suit was a marvel of alien engineering, but Marcus had studied the technical manuals for all the diplomatic equipment on the station. He knew that the suit's life support system was based on a complex chemical process that converted stored methane tablets into breathable atmosphere, while filtering out oxygen and nitrogen that would be toxic to Velterran physiology. His diagnostic scanner revealed the problem immediately. The suit's primary atmospheric processor had suffered a cascade failure when the station's emergency systems activated. The electromagnetic pulse from the emergency protocols had fried several key circuits, causing the suit to seal itself while simultaneously shutting down its air recycling system. It was a safety feature gone wrong, designed to protect the wearer in the event of catastrophic suit damage, but triggered by a false alarm. "I can fix this," Marcus said, more to reassure himself than to inform Zara. "The processor unit is damaged, but I can bypass the failed circuits and restore basic life support." Working in the confined space of the environmental suit while its wearer was still inside presented unique challenges. Marcus had to remove access panels and reroute power connections, while being careful not to further compromise the suit's integrity. His hands moved with practiced precision, guided by years of experience with emergency repairs and a deep understanding of alien technology. Zara watched him work with growing fascination. Despite her distress, she seemed intrigued by Marcus's methodical approach to the problem. The Velterrans were known for their appreciation of technical skill and problem-solving ability, traits they considered essential for any truly advanced civilization. As Marcus worked, he became aware of subtle changes in Zora's bioluminescent patterns. The chaotic swirls of red and orange were gradually being replaced by steadier patterns of blue and green, colors that indicated curiosity and growing calm. Her breathing had steadied as well, suggesting that his preliminary repairs were already improving her air supply. "There," Marcus said finally, closing the last access panel and running a final diagnostic. "Your suit's atmospheric processor is back online. You should have full life support restored." The change was immediate. Color returned to Zora's features as her suit began providing the methane-rich atmosphere she needed. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep purple and gold, colors that Marcus didn't recognize, but which seemed to indicate strong positive emotions. "Engineer Chen," she said, her voice now clear through the properly functioning translator. "You have saved my life. This creates obligations." "No obligations," Marcus replied, beginning to pack up his tools. "Just doing my job. Besides, I still need to figure out what caused the original emergency. Are you feeling well enough to move? We should get you to the medical bay for a proper examination." But Zara was staring at him with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. Her patterns had shifted again, this time to colors he had never seen before, deep crimson intertwined with brilliant silver, creating intricate spirals that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "You do not understand," she said quietly. "Among my people, when someone saves a life through personal risk and sacrifice, it creates what we call shalfek, a soul debt. This cannot be dismissed as simply doing your job." Marcus helped her to her feet, noting that she moved with the fluid grace characteristic of her species despite her recent ordeal. "Ambassador, I appreciate the sentiment, but really, any engineer on the station would have done the same thing." "No," Zara said firmly, her patterns now shifting to what Marcus recognized as the deep blue of absolute certainty. "What you did required not just technical skill, but courage, creativity, and compassion. You crawled through dangerous passages to reach me. You repaired technology you had never worked on before. You risked your own life for someone who was essentially a stranger." They made their way slowly toward the emergency medical station, Marcus helping to steady Zara as her body readjusted to her suit's restored life support systems. As they walked, she continued to explain concepts that were clearly important to her culture, but difficult to translate into human terms. "The shalfek is not simply gratitude," she said. "It is a recognition that your actions have created a bond between our souls, a connection that transcends species and culture. To my people, this is sacred." Marcus was beginning to realize that his simple act of emergency repair work had triggered something far more complex than he had anticipated. The way Zora looked at him had changed, and her bioluminescent patterns continued to display colors and configurations he had never seen in their previous casual interactions. When they reached the medical bay, Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief medical officer and xenobiologist, took charge of Zora's care. As she ran her diagnostic scanners over the Velterran ambassador, Marcus prepared to leave and return to investigating the original emergency that had started this entire incident. "Engineer Chen," Zora called out as he reached the door. "The shalfek cannot be ignored. When I have recovered from this ordeal, we must speak again. There are protocols that must be observed." Marcus nodded politely, not fully understanding but recognizing the seriousness in her voice. "Of course, Ambassador. I'm glad you're safe." As he left the medical bay, Marcus reflected on the events of the day. He had started his shift expecting nothing more challenging than routine maintenance on the atmospheric recycling systems. Instead, he had performed an emergency rescue, learned about Velterran culture, and apparently acquired some kind of spiritual obligation he didn't fully understand. The investigation into the original emergency revealed that there had been no actual hull breach. A malfunctioning sensor array had created false readings that triggered the station's emergency protocols unnecessarily. It was the kind of technical glitch that happened occasionally on complex space installations, usually resulting in nothing more serious than interrupted schedules and annoyed personnel. But today that simple malfunction had led to something far more significant. As Marcus returned to his quarters that evening, he found himself thinking about Zara's words about soul debts and sacred bonds. He had saved her life, but he was beginning to suspect that the consequences of that action were only just beginning to unfold. The patterns of light on her skin had been beautiful, he realized, complex and meaningful in ways he was only starting to appreciate. Tomorrow, he would need to learn more about Velterran culture and understand what the shalfek truly meant. Something told him that his simple act of engineering competence had started something that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Patterns of honor. 3 days after the emergency, Marcus received a formal invitation that made his heart race with nervousness. The message, delivered through the station's official diplomatic channels, was written in the flowing script of the Velterran language with a human translation below. Engineer Marcus Chen, your presence is respectfully requested in Ambassador Zara Velnathi's private quarters at 19 o'clock hours. The matter of Shalthek must be addressed according to the ancient protocols of our people. Please come alone, as this is a sacred matter between souls. The message was signed with an intricate symbol that seemed to shift and change even as Marcus looked at it. Marcus had spent the past 3 days researching Velterran culture in the station's extensive sinological database. What he had learned both fascinated and concerned him. The Velterrans were an ancient species with complex social rituals dating back thousands of years. The concept of Shalthek, the soul debt created when someone saved another's life, was deeply embedded in their culture and couldn't be dismissed or ignored without causing serious offense. Dr. Sarah Kim had tried to help him understand the cultural implications during their conversation in the medical bay earlier that day. Sarah was the station's expert on interspecies relations, and her knowledge of alien customs had prevented many diplomatic incidents over the years. The Velterrans take their sacred obligations very seriously, Sarah had explained, pulling up cultural files on her computer. The Shalthek ritual is one of their oldest traditions. When someone saves a Velterran's life through personal sacrifice, it creates a spiritual bond that must be acknowledged and honored. What exactly does that mean? Marcus had asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. That's where it gets complicated, Sarah admitted. The ritual of acknowledgement is called Shalveth, the sacred gratitude. It involves the life debt holder, in this case Zara, demonstrating complete trust and vulnerability to the person who saved them. It's meant to show that they trust you with their most precious possession, their life and soul. Marcus had felt his stomach drop. Dr. Kim, please tell me this doesn't involve what I think it involves. Sarah had given him a sympathetic look. It's not what you're thinking, Marcus, but it might seem that way to human eyes. The Velterran concept of vulnerability is different from ours. For them, the ultimate display of trust is to appear before someone completely unprotected, without any barriers physical or technological between them and the person they're honoring. Now, standing outside Zora's quarters, Marcus took a deep breath and pressed the door chime. The soft musical tone was answered immediately by Zora's voice. Please enter, Marcus Chen. The door slid open to reveal quarters that had been transformed into something that looked more like a temple than a living space. Soft bioluminescent plants from the Velterran homeworld provided gentle lighting in shades of blue and green. The air was filled with a subtle fragrance that reminded Marcus of rain on summer evenings. Intricate tapestries covered the walls, displaying patterns that seemed to move and shift in the gentle light. Zara stood in the center of the room, still wearing her environmental suit but with the helmet removed. Her bioluminescent patterns were displaying colors Marcus had never seen before, deep gold intertwined with silver, creating spirals that pulsed with soft inner light. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice carrying the melodic quality that made Velterran speech so distinctive. I know this must be confusing for you. Your people and mine view many things differently. Marcus nodded, trying to appear calm despite his nervousness. Dr. Kim explained some of the cultural background, but I want to make sure I understand what's expected of me. I don't want to accidentally offend you or your people. Zara's patterns shifted to warm amber, a color Marcus had learned indicated appreciation and approval. Your respect for our customs honors you, Marcus Chen. Many species dismiss what they do not understand, but you seek knowledge instead. This confirms that my soul chose well when it recognized the debt. She moved gracefully to a small table where several items were arranged. A crystal vessel filled with a softly glowing liquid, what appeared to be ceremonial instruments, and a datapad displaying Velterran text. The Shelveth has not been performed on this station before, Zora explained. Indeed, it has been many years since any member of my species has had cause to invoke it. But the ancient ways must be observed, or the spiritual balance between us will remain disturbed. Marcus found himself drawn to the intricate patterns on her visible skin. They were constantly shifting, displaying emotions and thoughts in ways that human body language could never match. What do I need to do? You need only to witness and accept, Zora replied. The burden of the ritual falls upon me, as the one who owes the debt. But first, you must understand what you will see, so that no misunderstanding can occur between us. She activated a holographic display that showed images of the Velterran homeworld, towering crystalline cities that rose from vast methane seas, beings whose entire bodies glowed with shifting patterns of light, ceremonies conducted in chambers where the walls themselves seemed alive with bioluminescent displays. My people evolved in an environment where concealment meant death, Zora explained as the images played. Our homeworld has many predators that hunt by detecting electromagnetic signatures, mechanical vibrations, or chemical emissions. Only those who could become completely transparent to such detection survived to reproduce. The implications began to dawn on Marcus. Your environmental suits, your technology, all of it serves to hide us, to protect us from a universe that our instincts tell us is dangerous, Zora confirmed. To appear before another being without these protections, without any barriers or defenses, represents the ultimate act of trust. It means we believe, with absolute certainty, that the other person would protect us even when we cannot protect ourselves. Marcus was beginning to understand the depth of what Zora was proposing. This wasn't about physical attraction or romantic gesture. This was about spiritual trust at a level that humans rarely experienced. Among my people, Zora continued, the Shelveth can only be performed once in a lifetime, and only for someone who has proven themselves worthy through actions, not words. You risked your life to save mine, Marcus Chen. You entered danger without hesitation. You solved problems that others deemed impossible. Most importantly, you did these things without expectation of reward or recognition. She paused, her patterns shifting to deep crimson and silver, the colors Marcus now recognized as indicating profound emotional significance. There is no shame in this ritual, Marcus Chen, only honor. But if witnessing the Shelveth would cause you distress or violate your cultural beliefs, I will understand. The debt would remain, but we could seek other ways to acknowledge it. Marcus looked at this remarkable being who had become so much more than just another diplomatic contact. Over the past 3 days, he had come to appreciate not just her intelligence and grace, but the depth of her character. The idea that she would offer him such profound trust, even at personal cost to herself, moved him in ways he hadn't expected. I would be honored to witness your ritual, he said quietly. Thank you for explaining it to me. Zora's patterns shifted to brilliant gold, and for the first time since he had known her, Marcus saw her smile. The expression was achingly beautiful, transforming her already elegant features into something radiant. She moved to the center of the room, where a circle of bioluminescent crystals had been arranged on the floor. As she began to remove her environmental suit, Marcus understood that he was witnessing something sacred. This wasn't about nudity in any human sense. It was about a being choosing to exist without protection in the presence of another, trusting completely in their goodwill and honor. The Velterran environmental suit was a marvel of engineering, but as Zara removed each component, Marcus realized that it represented much more than life support technology. Each piece was also a form of armor, a barrier between her and a universe full of potential threats. Removing it was an act of incredible courage. When she finally stood unprotected in the circle of crystals, Marcus was struck by the ethereal beauty of her people. The bioluminescent patterns that he had glimpsed on her arms and face covered her entire body, creating a living artwork that shifted and flowed with her emotions and thoughts. The patterns were incredibly intricate, more complex than any human art, and they pulsed with soft inner light that made her seem almost translucent. "I am Zora Velnathi of the Crystal Cities," she said, her voice carrying a formal cadence that indicated she was reciting ancient words. "I stand before you without protection, without concealment, without defense. My life is in your hands as it was when you saved me from the void. I offer you the Shelveth, the sacred gratitude, in recognition of your courage, your wisdom, and your compassion." The patterns on her skin began to change, shifting through colors and configurations that told a story Marcus could almost understand. He saw representations of the space station, of the emergency that had threatened her life, of his arrival through the maintenance shaft. The images were stylized but unmistakable, a living tattoo that chronicled their shared experience. "Do you accept the Shelveth?" Zara asked. "Do you accept the bond between our souls, acknowledging that your actions have created a connection that transcends species and culture?" Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This was bigger than just accepting gratitude. This was about accepting a place in an alien culture, becoming part of a tradition that stretched back thousands of years. "I accept the Shelveth," he said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "I accept the bond between us, and I promise to honor the trust you have placed in me." The change in Zora's patterns was immediate and dramatic. The images of their shared experience transformed into something new, interlocking spirals of gold and silver that seemed to represent unity and harmony. The light from her bioluminescence grew brighter, filling the room with a soft radiance that made everything seem magical. "The debt is acknowledged," Zara said, and Marcus could hear the relief in her voice. "The balance is restored. The bond between us is forged." As she began to dress again, Marcus found himself thinking about the profound trust she had just shown him. No human had ever made themselves so vulnerable in his presence, and he understood that few beings of any species ever would. The Shelveth was more than a ritual. It was a gift of extraordinary value. "Zara," he said as she sealed her environmental suit, "what happens now? How does this bond work between our species?" Her patterns had settled into gentle waves of blue and green, colors that Marcus now recognized as contentment and peace. "Now we learn from each other," she said simply. "The bond created by the Shelveth is not a burden or obligation. It is an opportunity. We are connected now, Marcus Chen, in ways that few beings ever experience. We can share knowledge, culture, perspectives. We can become bridges between our peoples." Marcus thought about the implications. Station Harmony was humanity's first major diplomatic installation, designed to foster cooperation between species. What if the bond created by the Shelveth could serve as a model for deeper interspecies relationships? "Would other Velterrans accept me because of this bond?" he asked. "More than accept," Zora replied, her patterns shifting to warm gold. "They would honor you. The Shelveth is recognized throughout our culture. Those who have been granted it are considered family, regardless of their species." Over the following weeks, Marcus discovered that the bond created by the Shelveth was more profound than he had imagined. He found himself able to read Zora's bioluminescent patterns with increasing accuracy, understanding emotions and concepts that had no human equivalent. She, in turn, began to grasp the subtleties of human expression and communication. They spent hours together, sharing stories of their respective homeworlds, discussing philosophical concepts that had never been translated between their species, exploring ideas about science, art, and the nature of consciousness itself. Marcus realized that he was receiving an education that no human had ever experienced before. Dr. Sarah Kim observed their growing friendship with professional fascination. "You two are creating a new model for interspecies cooperation," she told Marcus during one of their regular check-ins. "The depth of cultural exchange you're achieving is unprecedented." "It's not just cultural exchange," Marcus replied, trying to find words for something that felt much deeper. "The Shelveth created a connection I can't really explain. It's like having a window into a completely different way of experiencing the universe." Zara felt the same way. During their conversations, she often spoke about how Marcus's human perspective had opened new ways of thinking for her. Your species approaches problems so differently than mine, she told him one evening as they sat in the station's observation deck, watching the stars. Velterrans seek harmony and balance, but humans create solutions that transform the very nature of the problem. Is that good or bad? Marcus asked. Her patterns shifted to the deep purple that indicated contemplation. It is necessary, she said finally. The galaxy is changing, Marcus Chen. New challenges are emerging that will require new ways of thinking. The bond between us, between our species, may be exactly what both our peoples need to face whatever comes next. As Marcus looked out at the stars, he reflected on how much his life had changed since that emergency 3 weeks ago. He had started as a simple engineer doing routine maintenance. Now he was part of something larger, a bridge between two civilizations, a living example of what was possible when beings chose trust over fear. The bioluminescent patterns on Zora's exposed arms were pulsing gently with colors of contentment and hope. She had taught him that among her people, the greatest honor was not individual achievement, but the creation of connections that strengthened the whole community. Thank you, Marcus said quietly, for trusting me with the Shelveth, for showing me what real courage looks like. Zara's patterns shifted to brilliant gold, and she smiled that radiant smile that still took Marcus's breath away. Thank you, Marcus Chen, for being worthy of that trust, for showing me that some bonds transcend the barriers between species. As they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the endless dance of stars, both of them understood that they had become something new. Not just human and Velterran, but something that existed in the space between their species, a living symbol of what the universe could become when beings chose connection over separation, understanding over fear. The Shelveth had been completed, the sacred debt acknowledged and honored. But what had grown from that ancient ritual was something neither of their species had words for yet, a new kind of relationship that would serve as a foundation for deeper cooperation between their peoples, and perhaps between all the species that called the galaxy home. In the weeks that followed, other diplomatic teams began requesting Marcus's assistance with interspecies technical problems, recognizing that his bond with Zora had given him unique insights into alien perspectives. Zara, meanwhile, found herself serving as a cultural translator not just for Velterran customs, but for the entirely new protocols that were emerging from human-Velterran cooperation. They had saved each other, Marcus realized. He had saved her life, but she had saved his future, opening up possibilities he had never imagined. The emergency that had brought them together had been random, but what they had built from that moment was anything but accidental. It was the beginning of something that would change both their species forever.